On the distant planet of Arcturia, a place where towering crystals shimmered in the light of multiple suns and cities floated above the surface like pearls on water, the royal palace stood as a symbol of the planet's power. Princess Zuria, the youngest heir to the Arcturian throne, was known throughout the galaxy for her intelligence, beauty, and strict sense of duty. Arcturians had long been regarded as one of the most advanced civilizations in the universe, their technology far beyond what most species could even imagine. Their ships could travel faster than light, and their cities were marvels of engineering, suspended in the sky or hidden beneath the surface of their planet. Today was a day like no other. Princess Zuria was seated at a grand table in the royal council hall, surrounded by advisors, generals, and diplomats. The mission at hand was one of great importance, a diplomatic journey to a distant star system, where several powerful species were waiting for her. The purpose of the mission was to solidify a series of peace treaties, ensuring Arcturia's influence over many parts of the galaxy. Zuria's task was to represent her people, as she had done many times before, but today something was different. "Your Highness," General Carrick said, his voice deep and formal as he addressed the princess, "we have prepared the finest ships in the royal fleet for your journey. You may choose any one of them for the mission. Our most advanced vessels are at your disposal. The Sci-Fi, the Eclipsion, the Ember Star, all are ready to ensure your safety and the success of this diplomatic endeavor." Zuria raised an eyebrow, her gaze cold and calculating. She had been raised to expect the best. Arcturians never settled for anything less than perfection, and their ships were the finest in the galaxy. Still, she had no interest in any of them. She had made a decision that would leave the council stunned. "Thank you, General," Zuria said softly, her voice calm yet filled with authority. "But I will not travel on any of these ships." The room fell silent. The advisors exchanged puzzled glances, unsure of how to respond. General Carrick, who had commanded fleets across the galaxy, took a step forward, clearly confused. "But Your Highness, these ships are equipped with the latest in Arcturian technology. They are far superior to anything the other species possess. Why would you refuse such gifts?" Zuria stood up, her posture perfect, her expression unwavering. "I will not travel unless it is aboard a human ship," she declared. Gasps filled the room. Her word hung in the air like a strange, unsettling breeze. The Arcturians were a proud people, and they had always regarded humans as a species of little consequence. Humans were considered primitive in the eyes of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. Their technology was centuries behind, their ships old and unreliable. How could a princess of Arcturia, someone who represented the future of their people, request such a thing? The chief diplomat, Vira, spoke up hesitantly. "Your Highness, with all due respect, humans, their ships are barely capable of interstellar travel. Their technology is rudimentary at best. How can we trust them to keep you safe?" Zuria's gaze never wavered. She had been thinking about this for some time, and she knew what she was doing. Humans may be young, but they have something no other species has, something that no amount of technology can replace. They have the spirit of survival, the will to fight against all odds, and a sense of loyalty to one another that no other species can match. The room was still, the council members too stunned to speak. Zuria's words echoed in the silence. She had always been known for her wisdom, but this was unexpected. Why would she, a princess from one of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations, choose to travel aboard a human ship? Finally, General Carrick spoke again, his voice filled with disbelief. "Your Highness, with all respect, this is absurd. The safety of your mission is at stake. Are you suggesting we place you in the hands of a species that has only recently discovered space travel?" Zuria's voice was firm, yet calm. "I am suggesting that we place our trust in humans, General. Their resilience, their creativity, and their ability to think outside the box make them worthy of this mission. I have seen their ships, and I have seen their courage. I believe they are capable of more than you think." Vira shook his head in confusion. But this is unheard of. How can we send you to the diplomatic summit aboard a human ship? The galaxy would laugh at us. Zaria's eyes narrowed as she fixed Vira with a steady gaze. The galaxy may laugh, but they will also learn. They will learn that Arcturia is not afraid to be different, to take risks, and to trust in the unexpected. If humans can prove themselves worthy of my trust, then they will prove themselves worthy of the galaxy's respect. The silence in the room deepened. Zaria's resolve was clear, and there was no room for negotiation. She would travel on a human ship or not at all. Her decision was final. The Royal Council had no choice but to comply. They would find a way to make it happen, though they did so reluctantly, their pride bruised by the princess's unusual request. As the council meeting ended, Zaria walked through the grand hall, her steps echoing in the silence. She had made her decision, and though it might change the course of her people's history, she felt certain it was the right one. The galaxy was vast, and it was time for Arcturia to see humanity not as a primitive race, but as a powerful force that could shape the future. And perhaps, just perhaps, Zaria would learn something about herself and about humanity that she could not have imagined. The royal palace of Arcturia was left behind as Princess Zaria boarded her transport ship, heading for a journey that would take her far from her home. The Royal Council had reluctantly agreed to her demand to travel aboard a human ship, but they were skeptical. No one in the galaxy had ever heard of an Arcturian princess traveling with a species as young and inexperienced as humanity. The princess, however, was resolute. She had made her choice. Now she was about to see for herself what humanity was capable of. Little did she know, the crew of the Endurance, the human ship that was to carry her, was equally uncertain of what to expect. Captain Lucas Grant stood on the bridge of the Endurance, watching as the ship's systems came online. The Endurance was not the most advanced vessel in the human fleet, but it was known for its resilience and ability to adapt under pressure. Grant had been in command of this ship for several years, and he knew it like the back of his hand. The crew, though small compared to the massive starships of other species, was tight-knit and resourceful. When Zaria's request had first reached him, Grant had been stunned. A princess of Arcturia wants to travel with us. He had asked his first officer, Lieutenant Sarah Hayes, more than once. It seemed impossible. But then, after some thought, he realized this could be an opportunity to prove to the galaxy just how far humanity had come. They weren't just the underdogs anymore. They were rising. "I've read about Arcturia," Sarah said, staring at the communication screen in disbelief. "Their technology is light years ahead of ours. This feels like an experiment. But maybe, just maybe, it's a chance to show what we're really capable of." Grant nodded, rubbing his chin. "We'll have to treat this carefully. She's a princess, and they don't usually travel with, well, humans. I'll be the first to admit, I'm nervous. But we're going to make sure she sees exactly what humanity has to offer. We might just learn something ourselves along the way." The Endurance was waiting for the princess at the edge of the Arcturian system. When Zaria's transport finally arrived, the Endurance crew was prepared, but they were also filled with curiosity and uncertainty. No one could deny the shock of having an Arcturian royal step aboard their ship, and they all wondered what kind of person she would be. Zaria stepped off her transport, tall and regal, her violet eyes scanning the crew with a sharp intelligence. Her silver hair shimmered as she walked, a crown of delicate crystals sitting on her head. The crew members couldn't help but stare in awe, but Zaria's presence was calm and confident. She gave a small nod to Grant, who stood waiting at the ramp to greet her. "Captain Grant," she said, her voice steady, but not without curiosity. "I trust your ship is ready for the task ahead." Grant was a tall man, solid and steady, with an air of confidence about him that was equal parts calm and commanding. He returned her gaze with a respectful bow, though he knew this wasn't the usual diplomatic meeting he was used to. "Princess Zaria," Grant replied. "Welcome aboard the Endurance. We're ready for anything." As the princess stepped aboard, she immediately began to observe her surroundings. The corridors were tight but efficient, and the ship's design was far more practical than the sprawling palaces of Arcturia. The hum of the engines vibrated beneath her feet, and she could feel the difference in technology right away. This was no sleek, polished vessel of the elite. It was a working ship, used for exploration and survival in the harshest parts of space. Zeria looked around at the crew, many of them giving her curious glances, unsure of what to make of their royal guest. She nodded to a few, her sharp gaze never missing a detail. "Captain," she said, turning to Grant once more, "I have heard much about your species. I have heard of your adaptability, your resilience, your ability to overcome the most difficult odds. It is why I am here." Grant's eyebrows furrowed. "You have heard of us?" Zeria nodded. "I have. From the stories of your world's history, how you once struggled with division, conflict, and yet you rose above it all. Your species is one of great potential. Perhaps I will understand that potential better during this journey." The captain couldn't help but smile. "I'll make sure you get that chance, Princess." As the Endurance made its way toward the meeting point of the peace talks, Zeria spent the next few days observing the crew. At first she was distant, keeping mostly to herself and her small group of attendants. But as the hours passed, she began to see more and more of the humans in action. It was during a routine maintenance check on the engines that she first saw the crew's unique strength. The Endurance had experienced a minor malfunction, and one of the engine units began to overheat. The engineering team scrambled to find a solution. No one panicked, even though the pressure was high. They worked together, communicating clearly, and using tools and methods that seemed far from perfect. But somehow, they always made it work. Zeria was watching from the observation deck when she saw it. Lieutenant Hayes, the first officer, rushing down a narrow hallway, covered in grease and sweat, a team of engineers behind her. There was no sign of fear, no hesitation. They were focused, determined, and they solved the problem in record time. It was in that moment that Zeria saw the truth in her decision. These humans, with their primitive technology, were capable of extraordinary things. Their strength wasn't in their ships or their weapons, but in their will to push forward, no matter the odds. The princess began to engage more with the crew. She spoke to the engineers, asking questions about their methods. She joined the pilots in the control room, watching their movements with a sharp eye. Each day, her admiration for the humans grew. She realized she had been wrong to underestimate them. One evening, Zeria joined Captain Grant in the observation lounge, where they looked out at the stars. "Captain," Zeria began, her voice thoughtful, "I came here expecting to find a species struggling to keep up with the rest of the galaxy. But I see something different. I see a species ready to rise, to take its place among the stars. You may not have the technology we have, but your strength lies in something far greater." Grant turned to her, his expression softening. "We've had to fight for everything, Princess. Maybe that's what makes us stronger. We don't give up easily." Zeria nodded. "Perhaps that's something we could all learn from." As the Endurance continued its journey, Zeria knew she had made the right choice. This was only the beginning of a partnership between humanity and Arcturia that would change the course of history. The journey to the peace talks was long, and as the Endurance cruised through the vast emptiness of space, the crew settled into a rhythm. Princess Zeria, who had initially kept to herself, now spent more time with the crew. She engaged in conversations with the engineers, learned the intricacies of human flight navigation, and even joined Captain Grant for dinner in the crew's mess hall. Her presence, once aloof and distant, became a part of daily life aboard the ship. Captain Grant, too, had begun to see a new side of the princess. Beneath her royal exterior, Zeria was sharp, strategic, and practical. She had quickly gained the respect of the crew, not because of her title, but because of her ability to think quickly and solve problems in the midst of chaos. She wasn't just a princess, she was a diplomat, a warrior, and a leader in her own right. Yet, despite the growing bond between Zeria and the crew, there was still a sense of unease. The peace talks were crucial, and many of the factions they were heading to meet had never interacted with humans before. There was a fear that the humans might not be taken seriously. The galaxy's most powerful species viewed humanity as young, untested, and unpredictable. The Endurance wasn't the kind of ship that commanded respect at first glance. But all of that was about to change. 2 days before the Endurance was set to arrive at the Peace Summit, an unexpected threat emerged. The ship's sensors picked up several hostile ships approaching rapidly from an uncharted region of space. They were small, fast, and heavily armed. Pirates, most likely. The Endurance wasn't equipped to fight off an attack from such a force, especially with the Princess on board. This was not the type of challenge Grant had anticipated. "Captain, I'm detecting multiple ships closing in," Lieutenant Hayes called from the bridge. Her voice tense. "They're not responding to our hails. They're definitely hostile." Grant's eyes narrowed. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers. Make sure the Princess stays in a secure location. Let's see what we're dealing with." As the crew worked quickly to put the ship on high alert, Zeria appeared on the bridge, her eyes scanning the controls. She had been briefed on the situation, and she was already preparing for action. "Captain, I've faced hostile forces before. If you'll allow me, I can assist in the defense." Grant turned to her, surprised. "Princess, this is not a matter for diplomacy. These pirates are armed and dangerous. We need to protect the ship and your safety." Zeria stood tall, her gaze unwavering. "I understand your concern, Captain, but I have seen what your crew is capable of. The Endurance might not be as advanced as an Arcturian ship, but you have something that can defeat these pirates, your ingenuity. I want to help." Grant hesitated for a moment. He knew how important it was to keep Zeria safe, but he also knew that this was the kind of challenge that humans thrived on. When the odds were stacked against them, that was when they proved their true strength. "All right, Princess," he said finally. "We'll work together. But stay close to the bridge and stay alert. This is no ordinary fight." Zeria nodded, her face set with determination. As the hostile ships grew closer, Grant and his crew took immediate action. The Endurance was agile, and the crew was quick to respond. But the pirates were relentless. Their ships were smaller, faster, and designed for hit-and-run tactics. It quickly became clear that the Endurance was outmatched in terms of firepower. But this was where humans were different. The pirates may have had superior weapons, but they lacked the adaptability and quick thinking that humans were known for. As the pirates closed in, Captain Grant gave an order to Lieutenant Hayes. "Activate the decoy drones. Let's see if we can confuse them." The drones scattered across the space around the Endurance, emitting false signals and mimicking the ship's signature. The pirates, eager for the kill, fell for the trap. They began targeting the decoys, thinking they had found the real ship. This bought the Endurance valuable time. Zeria stood beside Grant, watching the action unfold. "It's clever," she said, impressed. "You don't have the weapons we do, but you have something more powerful: creativity and resourcefulness." Grant gave her a small smile. "We don't always have the best tools, Princess, but we know how to use what we've got." For the next several minutes, the Endurance played a dangerous game of cat and mouse with the pirates. The crew used every trick they could think of: switching engines, changing the ship's signature, launching more decoys, anything to confuse the enemy. It wasn't long before the pirates realized they had been outsmarted. Frustrated and disoriented, they attempted a final assault, but it was too late. The Endurance had taken evasive action once again, and in the process, it had put the pirates in a vulnerable position. Using a well-timed shot from the ship's cannons, the crew disabled the pirate leader's vessel, sending the remaining attackers fleeing. The bridge erupted in cheers as the threat was neutralized. Zeria, who had remained calm throughout the chaos, allowed herself a small smile. She had seen the strength of humanity in action, and she was more impressed than she had ever imagined. "Well done, Captain," she said, her voice calm but filled with respect. "You've proven your point. You are capable of much more than I expected." Grant nodded, his face serious but proud. "We may not have the most powerful weapons, Princess, but we have something that counts just as much: our ability to think, to adapt, and to keep fighting." Zarya stood silently for a moment, reflecting on the battle. She had been wrong to doubt humans. In that moment, she saw not only their strength but their potential. The galaxy would soon see them as more than just a young, untested species. They were a force to be reckoned with. The Endurance continued its journey to the peace talks, but the crew now knew that this was only the beginning. The galaxy had just witnessed what humanity was capable of, and Zarya would make sure the rest of the universe saw it too. The Endurance arrived at the star system where the peace talks were to take place. It was a bustling sector of the galaxy, with ships from different species orbiting the massive space station that served as the meeting place. The station itself was a marvel, huge and gleaming with metallic surfaces, surrounded by floating platforms and docking bays. From a distance, it looked like a giant silver ring, holding the hopes and dreams of thousands of species. As the Endurance made its final approach, Princess Zarya stood on the observation deck, her eyes scanning the impressive space station. The crew had managed to get her safely through the pirate attack, and now it was time to face the real challenge: negotiating peace among some of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. "I've never seen anything like it," Zarya said, her voice thoughtful as she turned to Captain Grant, who stood beside her. "The size, the technology. This is a place where the fate of entire civilizations is decided." Grant nodded, his expression serious. "It's a big responsibility, but we're here to make sure you succeed, Princess." Zarya gave him a small, appreciative smile. Despite the differences between their species, she had come to trust Grant and his crew. They had proven themselves in battle, and now they would help her navigate the political challenges ahead. The meeting was to begin in a few hours, and Zarya knew she had a crucial role to play. As the representative of Arcturia, the eyes of the galaxy would be on her. She had trained for this her entire life, but nothing could prepare her for the diverse group of leaders she was about to face. There were representatives from the powerful Zixel Federation, the ancient Koran Empire, and even the nomadic Kreshi tribe. Each of these factions had their own agenda, their own interests, and their own power. Zarya was the one chosen to bring them all to the table, to find common ground where none seemed to exist. But as the time approached, doubt began to creep into her mind. Could she really do this? Could she convince these powerful beings to put aside their differences and agree to peace? What if the galaxy didn't listen to her, didn't respect her? As the Endurance docked with the station, Zarya's thoughts were interrupted by the soft chime of an incoming message. She turned to see Captain Grant on the other side of the room, holding a communication pad. "Princess, the Zixel representative has requested an audience before the summit," Grant said. "They want to speak with you privately." Zarya's brow furrowed. The Zixel Federation was one of the most powerful and influential factions in the galaxy. Their reputation for manipulation and diplomacy was legendary. If they were requesting a private meeting, it could mean anything, from an attempt to sway her to their side to an attempt to undermine the peace talks entirely. "Very well," Zarya replied, her voice steady. "I'll meet with them, but make sure our security is tight. I don't trust them." Grant nodded, his expression grave. "I'll make sure everything is arranged. You're not going in alone, Princess. We'll be right behind you." Zarya felt a surge of appreciation for the humans. Despite their technological limitations, they had a loyalty and determination that made them reliable allies. She had seen it firsthand during the pirate attack, and she was seeing it again now. She had come to depend on them, not just for their skills, but for their friendship. The meeting with the Zixel representative took place in a small private conference room on the station. As Zarya entered, she was met by a tall, imposing figure, the Zixel ambassador, Avos was dressed in elegant robes that shimmered in the soft lighting of the room. His eyes were sharp, calculating, as if he could read her every thought. His long fingers hovered over the edge of the table, and his voice was smooth as silk. "Princess Zuria," Avos began, his tone warm but laced with hidden intent. "It's an honor to meet you in person. I trust your journey here was uneventful." Zuria took a seat across from him, her posture straight and regal. "The journey was fine, but I'm not here for pleasantries, Ambassador. I'm here for peace." Avos chuckled softly, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Of course, peace. But peace requires more than just good intentions, Princess. It requires strength, strategy, and most importantly, allies. Arcturia has many powerful friends, but you must also understand that the Zixel Federation is a force to be reckoned with. We have the means to help you achieve your goals, but we must have something in return." Zuria's eyes narrowed. She had expected this. The Zixel were not interested in peace for its own sake. They were always calculating, always looking for an advantage. "You want something," she said flatly. "What is it?" Avos leaned forward, his fingers steepling together. "Your cooperation, Princess. We need Arcturia's support in the coming trade negotiations. You see, the Koran Empire has been causing trouble along the borders of our territory. We need your military might to ensure that our interests are protected. In return, we will support your peace efforts and help bring the Kreshi to the table. But you must choose. Princess, will you stand with us or will you align with the others?" Zuria took a deep breath. She had expected a proposal, but not one so direct. She knew this was the moment where her leadership would be tested. If she agreed to the Zixel's terms, it could give her the support she needed to force the other factions to listen. But at what cost? "I will stand with peace, Ambassador," she said, her voice unwavering. "And I will not sacrifice the ideals of Arcturia for any one faction. If we are to move forward, it will be with fairness, not manipulation." Avos' expression faltered for a brief moment, but he quickly regained his composure. "I see. Then we will see how far your idealism takes you, Princess. I hope you understand the weight of the choices you are about to make." The meeting ended with no further agreement. As Zuria left the room, she could feel the weight of Avos' words pressing down on her. This was only the beginning. The peace talks were about to begin, and the true test of her leadership was just ahead. As she walked back to the Endurance, Zuria took a deep breath. She knew the road ahead would not be easy, and that the galaxy's most powerful factions would not give in without a fight. But she was ready. She had come this far, and she would not let her people down. The summit was about to begin, and Zuria was ready to face the challenge head-on. The Peace Summit had officially begun. The massive conference room aboard the space station was buzzing with activity as delegates from all corners of the galaxy gathered. It was an overwhelming sight. Species of all shapes, sizes, and colors, some humanoid, some not, all engaged in their own conversations and debates. Representatives from the Koran Empire, the Zixel Federation, and many others filled the room, their voices a mix of languages that echoed off the metallic walls. Captain Grant and his crew stood at the back of the room, watching as Princess Zuria made her way to the front. She was poised, confident, and determined. Despite the pressure of representing her people, she carried herself with the grace of a true leader. Grant could see that she was still young, but there was no doubt in his mind. She was ready for this. Zuria had been preparing for this moment for years, but as she stepped into the center of the room, she couldn't shake the feeling that the weight of the galaxy rested on her shoulders. She had come here to bring peace, to find a way to unite species that had been in conflict for centuries. But she knew that it would not be easy. This was a game of diplomacy and deceit, where every word spoken could tip the balance of power. As the summit began, the lights dimmed, and the vast holographic display in the center of the room lit up. The head of the station's council, a tall and regal figure from the Koran Empire, stood at the podium. He was known as Praetor Varick, and his reputation for cunning and ruthlessness was legendary. "Welcome," Praetor Varric's voice boomed, silencing the room. "We are gathered here today for a singular purpose: peace. But peace cannot come without strength. Strength, my friends, is what keeps the galaxy in order, and it is strength that will guide us through these negotiations." Zeria watched him carefully. The Koran were known for their military might and their long history of conquest. Peace was not something they valued above power. And if Zeria was to succeed, she would need to navigate this delicate situation carefully. When it was her turn to speak, Zeria stood up from her seat, her eyes scanning the room. She was aware that all eyes were on her, waiting for her to make her move. "My fellow representatives," she began, her voice calm but firm, "I stand before you not as a princess, but as a leader who believes in the future. A future where all species can coexist, where conflict is not the first answer, but the last. Arcturia has always believed in peace, and we will fight for it, even when the odds are against us." Her words were met with murmurs of approval from some, and skeptical stares from others. The Zixel Federation, in particular, seemed uninterested in her ideals. They were already known for their manipulative tactics and for placing their interests above those of others. Ambassador Avos, the Zixel representative, was sitting across the room, his eyes never leaving her. He had made his position clear during their private conversation. Zeria was aware that the Zixel Federation would not easily let go of their own ambitions. If peace was to be achieved, she would need to balance their desires with the hopes of all the other factions present. Zeria continued, "The galaxy is not as divided as it seems. We all share the same space, the same resources. It is not strength that divides us, but our failure to see beyond our differences. If we can learn to see each other not as rivals, but as allies, then peace is within our reach." Her words resonated with many, but not everyone was ready to listen. Praetor Varric was already stepping forward, his face unreadable. He cleared his throat and spoke, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Ah, the idealist speaks of unity," Varric said, his tone mocking. "But how can we unite when one side threatens the peace with their constant expansion? The Koran Empire will not sit idly by while others challenge our sovereignty. Strength, Princess Zeria, is what maintains order. Without strength, there is no peace." Zeria remained calm, her gaze steady. She had expected this. The Koran would never agree to peace unless they had a hand in controlling the power structures of the galaxy. But she wasn't going to back down. This was her chance to make her position clear. "I do not seek to weaken anyone's power, Praetor," she said, her voice cutting through the tension. "But power should not come at the cost of others' freedom. If we are to have peace, it must be built on fairness, not fear." The room fell silent. Zeria could feel the eyes of the other delegates on her, weighing her words. She had spoken from the heart, and now the challenge was to see if her vision could stand up to the harsh realities of galactic politics. The next few hours were filled with intense discussions, each faction pushing its own agenda. The Koran Empire argued for military dominance, the Zixel Federation pushed for trade advantages, and the Kreshi tribe, who were known for their nomadic way of life, expressed concerns about the growing influence of centralized governments. Zeria listened carefully, her mind working overtime. It was clear that these factions were not interested in compromising. But she couldn't give up. She knew that if she could find a way to appeal to their shared interests, resources, protection, and stability, she could still broker a deal. As the day wore on, Zeria had a chance to speak with some of the other delegates in private. She spoke with the Kreshi, who were wary of any government trying to control their way of life. She spoke with the Zixel, who wanted to ensure their place as the dominant power in the galaxy. She spoke with the Koran, who were more interested in maintaining their military supremacy than anything else. By the end of the day, Zeria was exhausted. She had learned much about the factions' desires and fears, but she was still no closer to a resolution. The summit was far from over, and the road ahead would not be easy. But Zeria had learned one thing. In diplomacy, it was not just about making deals. It was about understanding your opponents and using that understanding to find a way forward. As she retired to her quarters that night, Zuria reflected on the day's events. She knew that tomorrow would be another challenge. But she was not afraid. She had the strength of her people behind her, and she was determined to find a way to make peace, no matter what it took. The second day of the summit arrived, and the tension in the conference room was palpable. Delegates were on edge, their tempers flaring as the discussions dragged on without resolution. Zuria sat at the table, her gaze focused and steady, though she could feel the pressure building. Every word spoken, every decision made, had the potential to shape the future of the galaxy, and she was right in the center of it all. Captain Grant stood near the entrance, watching over the proceedings with a watchful eye. He had been by Zuria's side through every challenge so far, and he knew that today would test her resolve like never before. The humans had no stake in the power struggles of the galaxy, but they believed in Zuria's vision. And for that, Grant would protect her at all costs. At the table, Praetor Varric of the Koran Empire was once again voicing his opinions, this time arguing for more control over the galaxy's military resources. His presence was as imposing as ever, and his words seemed to carry weight in the room. However, Zuria could see the cracks in his arguments. He spoke of strength and power, but there was little mention of stability, equality, or fairness, concepts that were at the heart of what she was trying to achieve. It is clear that peace cannot come without the necessary military might to defend it, Praetor Varric said, his voice echoing across the room. Without a strong defense, the galaxy will descend into chaos. Zuria raised her hand, signaling for the floor. The room quieted as she stood to speak. Her voice was calm but unwavering, a stark contrast to Varric's forceful tone. Peace cannot be achieved through fear, Praetor, Zuria replied, her words measured. If we continue to view power as the sole path to security, we will be forever locked in conflict. True peace comes from understanding, cooperation, and mutual respect. She could feel the eyes of the room on her, the weight of their judgment heavy on her shoulders. Some of the delegates looked at her with respect, others with skepticism. The Zixel Federation, in particular, remained unmoved by her arguments. Ambassador Avos, ever the opportunist, seemed to be considering his next move. Zuria knew that if she was to succeed, she needed to find common ground with the other factions. She could not rely solely on her ideals. She needed to think strategically. The fate of the summit and the future of the galaxy rested in her hands. Later that afternoon, Zuria received an unexpected visitor. The Kreshi delegation had requested a private meeting with her. The Kreshi were a nomadic people, scattered across the galaxy, and they had always maintained a distant relationship with the larger, more powerful factions. They were wary of centralized power and the potential for their way of life to be eroded. When Zuria entered the small meeting room, she was greeted by Thura, the leader of the Kreshi delegation. Thura was a tall, wiry figure with piercing eyes and a calm demeanor. She was known for her wisdom, but also for her unwavering commitment to the Kreshi way of life. Princess Zuria, Thura said, her voice soft but firm. We have been watching you, and we have been listening to your words. You speak of peace, of unity, but we must ask, what will you do to protect those like us, who have no interest in being swallowed up by the larger powers? Zuria took a seat across from Thura, her mind racing. She knew that the Kreshi would never accept a peace that came at the cost of their independence. They were a proud people, and they valued their freedom above all else. I understand your concerns, Zuria said, her tone gentle but sincere. Arcturia believes in peace, but we also believe in the right of every people to determine their own future. If we are to move forward, we must ensure that the autonomy of smaller groups, like the Kreshi, is respected. We cannot allow the powerful to trample on the freedoms of the weak. Thura studied her for a long moment, as if weighing Zuria's words. Finally, she nodded. Perhaps you are different from the others, Thura said quietly. Perhaps you understand that peace is not about conquering or controlling, but about coexistence. Zarya felt a flicker of hope. If she could win over the Kreshi, it would be a significant step forward. Their support could shift the balance of power in her favor, and it would send a message to the other factions that peace was not just a dream, but a reality that could be achieved. "We will stand with you, Princess," Thura said, her voice carrying a quiet strength. "But you must ensure that our way of life is not threatened. If you can promise us that, then we will lend our support to your cause." Zarya's heart lifted. She knew that this was a crucial moment. The Kreshi's endorsement could help sway the tide of the summit, but it would not come without conditions. She would have to honor their wishes and find a way to make peace with the larger powers without compromising the freedoms of the smaller factions. "Thank you, Thura," Zarya said, her voice filled with gratitude. "I promise you, I will do everything in my power to protect the rights of the Kreshi and all those who seek peace." As the meeting came to a close, Zarya felt a renewed sense of purpose. The Kreshi had offered her a powerful alliance, and she knew that she could not waste this opportunity. But she also understood that this was just one step in a long and difficult journey. The other factions would not be so easily swayed. That evening, as the delegates gathered for the next round of talks, Zarya took a deep breath and steeled herself. She was no longer just a princess seeking peace. She was a leader, a force to be reckoned with. The path ahead would not be easy, but she would face it with the strength and determination that had carried her this far. The summit was far from over, and the road to peace was still long and uncertain. But with the support of the Kreshi and the unwavering belief in her cause, Zarya knew that she had a fighting chance. The final day of the summit had arrived, and Zarya stood at the center of the conference room, feeling the weight of the galaxy on her shoulders. The delegates from all the factions were gathered, their faces a mixture of curiosity, skepticism, and anticipation. The Koran Empire, the Zixel Federation, the Kreshi, and many others all had their own agendas. Zarya knew that her every word, every decision, would be closely watched, not just by the galaxy's powers, but by those who had placed their hopes in her vision of peace. Captain Grant stood nearby, his eyes scanning the room, ever vigilant. The human crew of the Arcturian ship had supported Zarya from the very beginning, and they were determined to see her succeed. They had always believed that peace could be achieved, but now, as the summit reached its climax, that belief was being tested more than ever. Zarya had worked tirelessly to build bridges, to forge alliances, and to craft a plan that would unite the galaxy. But the last round of talks had been the most difficult yet. The Koran Empire had made it clear that they would never relinquish their military dominance. The Zixel Federation remained fixated on their trade deals and economic power. The Kreshi, though now on her side, had warned her not to compromise their way of life. As the final negotiations began, Zarya took a deep breath. It was time to make her final offer, the one that could bring peace, or shatter any hope of it. "Ladies and gentlemen," Zarya began, her voice steady, yet filled with determination, "we have come a long way to reach this moment. I have listened to each of you, understood your concerns, and respected your desires. But now we must look beyond our individual interests and think about the future we want to create. A future where the galaxy is not divided by fear and power, but united by cooperation and understanding." There was a murmur in the room, but Zarya pressed on, undeterred. "We cannot afford to continue down the path of constant conflict. We cannot afford to let the past define our future. It is time to build a new path, one where strength is found in unity, and where our diversity is our greatest asset. But this vision of peace can only work if we are willing to work together, if we are willing to make sacrifices for the greater good." Zarya paused, allowing her words to sink in. The delegates exchanged glances, their eyes narrowing with thought. She knew that not all of them were convinced, but she also knew that her vision had to be heard, even if it was difficult to accept. "Therefore," Zarya continued, "I propose a new framework for peace. treaty that recognizes the autonomy of each species, ensures mutual defense, and guarantees the protection of trade and resources across the galaxy. Under this treaty, we will establish a shared council, a body that represents all species and works together to solve the challenges we face. This council will have no single leader, no single power. It will be a cooperative effort where each voice matters and no one is left behind. The room was silent. Zaria could see the wheels turning in the minds of the delegates. This proposal was radical. It was different from anything they had ever seen. It would require them to give up some of their power, to share in the decision-making process. It would be difficult, but Zaria believed it was the only way forward. Praetor Varric, the leader of the Corran Empire, stood up first. His face was unreadable, but Zaria could feel the intensity of his gaze. The Corran had always been a people of strength, and Varric had never been one to share power easily. He looked around the room before speaking. "You ask us to give up our military superiority, Princess." Varric's voice was low but firm. "To trust that others will not take advantage of our generosity. This is a dangerous proposition." Zaria met his gaze, her expression unwavering. "I ask you to trust in the strength of cooperation, Praetor," she said. "We all have something to offer. The Corran Empire has power, yes, but power alone cannot sustain peace. It is cooperation, understanding, and trust that will keep us all safe. If we continue to rule through fear, we will only breed more hatred and violence. But if we lead through unity, we can build a future where no one is left behind." For a moment, there was silence. Zaria could see the other delegates waiting for Varric's response. He was known for his stubbornness, and many had expected him to reject her proposal outright. But instead, after a long pause, he spoke. "I will not deny that this is a bold idea, Princess," he said. "But it is also a necessary one. Perhaps it is time for us to try something different." Zaria could hardly believe her ears. The Corran Empire, the most powerful military force in the galaxy, was willing to entertain the idea of cooperation. It was a significant shift, one that could change everything. The room erupted in murmurs of surprise, but Zaria quickly regained their attention. "Thank you, Praetor Varric," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. "This is the first step toward peace. Together, we can build a future that benefits us all." The Zixel Federation's ambassador, Avos, was next to speak. His eyes were sharp, his expression calculating. "We have our own interests to protect, Princess," he said, "and we are not yet convinced that your proposal will guarantee our position in the galaxy's economy. But we are willing to discuss terms." Zaria nodded, knowing that this was just the beginning. The Zixel would not easily give up their economic control, but this was progress. Slowly, the factions that had once been at odds began to shift. The Kreshi, who had already pledged their support, remained firm in their commitment. Other smaller factions began to voice their approval as well, encouraged by Zaria's proposal for a shared council. Hours passed as the delegates continued to negotiate. Zaria stayed focused, listening to the concerns of each faction, adjusting her proposal to address their needs. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the summit came to a close. The delegates reached a tentative agreement, a framework for peace that recognized the autonomy of each species, established mutual defense pacts, and created the first-ever cooperative galactic council. As Zaria stood before the assembled delegates, her heart swelled with pride. It had not been easy, and the road ahead would still be difficult. But today, they had taken a giant leap toward a peaceful future. For the first time, the galaxy's factions had come together not to fight, but to build something greater than themselves. Zaria turned to Captain Grant, who stood nearby, his face filled with pride and admiration. She smiled, knowing that this was just the beginning of the journey. Together, they had changed the future of the galaxy.